My name's Ken Dartez. I'm a flight paramedic with Acadian Ambulance Service. Essentially, when we're going to perform a fixed-wing air medical transport, generally what we do is have the ambulance bring the patient to the airport. When the ambulance gets here to the airport, they will have the patient on the stretcher. When the patient's on the stretcher, we have a method that we use with some tools to allow us to safely transfer the patient from the stretcher into the aircraft. Inside the wing locker here is a ramp. And the ramp is used to, as I said, safely transfer the patient from the stretcher into the aircraft. And this is done by attaching this ramp. And what would happen is the patient on the stretcher would be rolled up to this point, and then we would take this ramp and drop it down to the level where the stretcher is and just slide the actual stretcher itself from the stretcher from the ambulance onto this ramp. Once it's on this ramp, we would pick it up, put this foot down, and then someone is inside the plane and they will take the stretcher and actually physically maneuver it in place and lock it onto the life port. This particular plane is a King Air. It's a Beechcraft King Air 200C. The C means it's a 200 series. The C means it's a cargo plane, which explains this big door. Most normal airplanes don't have a cargo door. They only have a passenger entry door. This one has a passenger entry door built into the cargo door. The larger opening allows us for a much easier egress and ingress with the patient in and out of the airplane. This aircraft would be used for a transport that would be farther away and would be more or less prohibitive from a helicopter, because a helicopter would have to stop several times along the way to take on fuel. Whereas once the patient is loaded in this plane, we can effect the transfer from the location where we're leaving all the way to the destination. Okay, this is what's called a life port medical sled. The base of this sled is designed to mount in the tracks of the airplane, same tracks that the seats mount in. And essentially it's secured in place, and there's a large power connector that connects to the plane's power. It also contains a large oxygen bottle that is filled from the outside, and that makes the sled basically self-contained. What happens is, once we have the patient on the stretcher, naturally there would be a sheet on it, there would be a pillow, the patient's comfortable. We have the pilots turn power on. Once they feed power to the sled itself, then we have, in the front here, we have a 110 or 115 volt AC, and we have 3 receptacles so that we can plug in IV pumps, IV pump chargers, EKG monitor chargers, ventilator, anything that we need to power with 110 volts. We can plug it into here, and there's an internal inverter that takes the power from the plane and turns it into 110. And we also have a built-in suction, and we also have built-in compressed air. It's got an air compressor on it. The air compressor would be used to assist in operating the ventilator. So if we need air, if we need oxygen, if we need power, everything is self-contained on this sled, which you would not normally have in an airplane. So that's why it's specifically designed for an airplane. And each one of these is designed for the airplane that it's in. If we're using a different kind of airplane, then we're going to use a different type of sled. It's going to have a little bit different mounting configuration, and the wiring is going to be a little bit different, but it's going to do the same thing. And the stretcher itself is actually very nimble. As you can see, it locks into place on these little pegs, each one of the feet, and that's what allows it to slide in and out on the ramp. We also have what we call a clip deck, which we attach to the ambulance stretcher, and these feet lock into place on that clip deck the same way they lock in on here. And that allows us to take this stretcher to the hospital put the patient on this stretcher. They stay on the same stretcher the whole time. And then once we get it back in here, we would slide it in, get it in place, and then lock it in place. And now it's secured. And then we use the shoulder straps, the chest strap, and the leg straps, and secure the patient themselves in the airplane. The only thing we can't do is stop on the side of the road. If we do have an in-flight emergency, which has never happened to me, it's never happened to one of our crews, but when the pilot sets up his flight plan, when he files his flight plan from point A to point B. But he already has designated stops on the way that if we would need to make an emergency landing, he'll know exactly where he's going to land. All he has to do is declare an in-flight medical emergency, and the aircraft takes priority over everything else, and he can descend very quickly and get us down to an airport. And at the same time, he's communicating with the tower. The tower can have an ambulance waiting for us so we can take the patient to a hospital if we would need to.